Increasing Step Counts: A Behavior Change Replication Project by Alyssa, Acorde, Chastity, Michelle, Natalia, and Rachel.
First, we will begin by looking at the original study and reviewing the supporting literature. The original study that we chose for replication is entitled Evaluating the Effectiveness of Goal Setting and Textual Feedback for Increasing Moderate Intensity Physical Activity in Adults. It was conducted by the Child and Family Studies at University of South Florida in Tampa by Michael Zarate, Raymond Miltenberger, and Diego Valbuena in 2019. It was a multiple baseline across participants design, which included 4 participants who wore a Fitbit Flex. They utilized goal setting and textual feedback. The textual feedback was in the form of a text sent to each participant after they met their goal, after each week, at whether or not they met their goal. And those were the 2 components. It was very simple, and we thought that we could replicate it. Other studies had components such as prizes and self-monitoring, but this one did not include those. The results showed a significant increase in intense steps for 3 out of the 4 participants. According to the World Health Organization, inactivity increases the likelihood of chronic diseases and mortality and is the 4th leading cause of death globally. Individuals who engage in at least 30 minutes or more of moderate physical activity for at least 5 to 7 days a week reduce their mortality rate by 20 to 30%. Those same individuals who engage in at least 150 minutes or more of moderate activity a week show higher levels of overall physical health and decrease in chronic diseases. Only approximately 1 out of every 3 people aged 15 and older currently meet the recommended weekly activity levels. In reviewing the literature, we found there are many other similar studies conducted. They had several variations in methods, including various participants. Some used children as participants, some neurotypical, some with disabilities, some targeted adults or elderly. They implemented studies with healthy individuals and others that were obese. They used reinforcers as a form of prizes in some of the studies with more frequent feedback, sometimes daily, self-monitoring forms, and internet components. One particular study targeted calorie expenditure specifically, and they looked at one of the limitations to that one was that it would be really hard to determine calorie intake, so a variable that was hard to control for. There were similar limitations that we cited to what we cited in our study as well that were found in these, such as time constraints and technological issues. And then the results also varied across the different studies, but overall, most saw an increase in step counts. And the consensus was that reinforcement contingencies were shown to be the most effective.
Purpose. Moving on, I will now be discussing the purpose. In this replication study, the purpose is to explore the efficacy of goal setting and textual feedback for increasing physical activity, which was specifically walking for the study, without any additional intervention components. We used two interventions, which consisted of goal setting and textual feedback, and these were used to increase daily step counts. The number of daily step counts were collected and measured daily with an Apple Watch. Apple Watches were used to measure steps, creating a multiple baseline design across the 6 participants involved in the study. This replication study was undertaken because of the nature of our daily routines. Being that all participants are online students and work, it is easy to neglect dedicating time towards physical activity since we are continuously studying and working on assignments. Okay, so continuing on, I'm now going to discuss the health benefits behind walking and tracking your daily step count. So, for walking, one of the benefits includes reducing body fat. Another one can be reducing the risk of any health diseases such as obesity, heart disease, strokes, diabetes, and some forms of cancer. Walking can also increase muscular strength and endurance, and it also can improve mental health by boosting mood from increased blood flow to the brain and the body. All of this is important when considering overall health and it can affect your daily living. So moving on to tracking steps, some health benefits for this could be that it helps maintain a healthy lifestyle to accumulate those health benefits, and it also reminds individuals of their progress and holds them accountable. So, in other words, the individual can actually monitor and see their progress, and this will lead to more motivation for the individuals to move more so they can continue to adapt towards living a healthy lifestyle. Another point that I would like to connect back to our purpose is social validity. Physical activity can help support daily living activities and independence for all individuals, especially those with disabilities. In other words, some physical activity is always better than no physical activity. Below, I've listed some exercise options for those with disabilities that they can engage in on their day to day basis. These can include walking, aquatic therapy, wheeling oneself in a wheelchair, wheelchair sports, seated volleyball, and swimming laps. These are just some of the options. There are various options out there. Specifically for our study, we focused on walking. Walking is a basic form of exercise that is usually used in day to day living. So, we do want to make sure we are walking as much as possible just to make sure that we are getting those health benefits that we should be getting daily. Methods.
There are 6 participants in this study who are all graduate students ranging from 22 to 45 years old. 4 have reported to having moderate activity, while 2 reported to having high activity. 4 are from Midwestern region, while 2 are from Southern region. The study was conducted in participants' individual homes, communities, and workplaces. Step tracking device was used for this study. 4 participants to use an Apple Watch and 2 participants to use an Apple iPhone Health app. A secondary device was also used for all of the participants to record the reliability of their steps. Um, this was done during baseline and throughout the intervention for at least 25 to 30% of the sessions. All recordings were prompted to be recorded at 8 p.m. daily, and all participants' data are stored in a spreadsheet that was later used for visual analysis. Target behavior to be increased here are steps. Steps include walking or running on any surface, including a treadmill or a stairmaster. Step taking will not be counted for instances of changing location from one point to another if the consistent movement of the foot is not observed with a given distance. An example of this would be riding a scooter or a bike. Be obtained by walking throughout the day in their homes, businesses, and during work. Participants were instructed to remove devices if it is registering steps when they are sitting and not actively moving themselves. The Apple Fitness app on both Apple Watch and iPhone automatically records your daily steps throughout the day and summarizes a total number in the app. Participants are instructed to record this app in a Google form every night. A multiple baseline design across participants was used, with a changing criterion design as face-to-face goals increase each time a participant meets their current step goal. The participants were divided into two groups of three. Participants in the first cohort will begin intervention after 10 days of baseline data collection. Once two out of the three participants have reached criteria for a phase change, the second cohort will begin the intervention phase. Once baseline data has been collected, each participant begins with a step goal that is 10% greater than the average number of steps they received on the week of the baseline data collection. Phase changes are to be evaluated every 5 sessions, whether a participant is to move on to a higher step number or to maintain their goal. If a participant reaches their goal, they are to start a new phase with a goal of 10% more than their average steps for the current phase. The participants had the opportunity to receive social reinforcement from the group when they met to review participant data. If a participant did not meet their goal, it stayed the same for the following week. If they had a significant increase in their number of steps one week due to unusual activity, an average from the previous 2 weeks will be calculated in order to set the weekly goal. As previously mentioned, inter-observer agreement was taken on 25 to 30% of the sessions. 25 to 30% of the sessions would equate to about 2 to 3 sessions out of the 5 sessions in each phase. The formula for total count IOA is calculated by dividing the smaller step count by the larger step count and multiplying it by 100 to get the percentage. Here are the results of the baseline IOA. Chastity had 97.3%, Elisa had 94.5%, and Natalia had 94.1%. Had 90.6%, Akurede had 98.6%, while Michelle had 91.6%. IOA was also recorded for the treatment phases. Chastity had a 98.2%, Elisa had a 97.3%, and Natalia had a 95.3%. Rachel had a 97.6%, Akurede had a 96.7%, and Michelle had a 92.3%. Treatment integrity was done by using a checklist for all the procedure steps. Treatment integrity was determined by calculating the number of steps followed correctly in the checklist during 25 to 30% of the session. Although the participants met frequently throughout the phases of this study, at the beginning of the treatment section, the participants failed to make phase changes systematically, which resulted in cohort group 1 having a longer phase duration of 9 sessions in phase 1 compared to cohort group 2 on phase 1, which only had 5 sessions. The participants discussed the procedure, clarified with all the members when phase changes should occur, and planned accordingly for all the following phase changes.
In this section, we will be going over the results of each participant's step count study. Each participant of the group created and submitted a changing criterion graph in which it was determined whether their step count goal was met through phases 1, 2, 3, and 4. For Natalia's step count results, her baseline calculated to an average of 4,434 steps, which was not met in phase 1. Phase 2 had a criterion goal set at 2,611 steps, which was also not met. At phase 3, a criterion goal of 3,073 steps was met as the data points are above the criteria line. And finally, at phase 4, a criterion goal of 6,436 steps was not met. For Alyssa's increasing step goal results, her baseline calculated to an average of 7,725 steps, which was not met in phase 1, as well as her phase 2, a criterion goal being at 7,725 steps was also not met, and in phase 3, a criterion goal of 5,730 steps was not met, and finally, a criterion goal of 5,730 steps in phase 4 was met, as her data points are above the criterion line. For Akarides' increasing step count goal, his baseline calculated to an average of 5,599 steps, therefore leading to a criterion goal at phase 1 not being met. In phase 2, a criterion goal was set at 2,588 steps, which was also not met. In phase 3, a criterion goal of 5,809 steps were met, as well as in phase 4, his criterion goal was met as both phases show data points above the criterion line. For Chastity's increasing step goal results, her baseline calculated to an average of 5,894 steps, which set the criterion goal being met in phase 1 as all data points are above the changing criterion line. Her phase 2 criterion goal was not met as all data points are under the criterion goal line, being set at 8,611 steps. In phase 3, her criterion goal at 8,743 steps was also not met. And finally, in phase 4, her criterion goal was met as all data points are above the criterion line, which was set to be at 7,561 steps. For Michelle's increasing step count results, her baseline came out to an average of 6,298 steps, which was not met in phase 1, leading to a phase 2 criterion goal being set at 5,594 steps, which was not met, and a phase 3 criterion goal of 5,591 steps, which was also not met. And finally, a phase 4 criterion goal set at 7,319 steps was also not met, as all data points are not above the line. Finally, for Rachel's step count results, her baseline calculated to an average of 4,475 steps, which was met in phase 1 as data points are above the criterion line, leading to a criterion goal of 7,028 steps, not being met in phase 2, leading to a criterion goal being set at 8,656 steps not being met at phase 3, and finally, phase 4 also not being met at a criterion of 8,656 steps, as data points are under the criterion line.
Conclusion.
In conclusion, the goal of the study was set after each phase to motivate each individual to hit their steps and increase it as much as they can daily. And we've gone through 4 phases. With the amount of steps that each individual was able to hit each and every day, there was results that the steps were showing impact on the body, as stated by the iPhone and the Apple Watch. It showed that as the steps were being entered, the number of calories were being burned in each participant. And participants could also testify that the impact of increasing your steps was also helping keeping them fit, which also goes to the purpose of the study and to the importance of the study of why it was needed to increase steps and what it does to the human body. In summary, the aim of this study has displayed how beneficial walking or any form of physical activity can indeed have an impact on the body. It doesn't necessarily have to be walking, it could be running, jogging, as long as it includes some sort of movements with the body, it will always have an impact on how the physical body feels. By replicating this study, we were able to track our steps daily with recorded devices such as our phone and the Apple Watch, which was needed to determine the inter-observer agreement and to make sure our data was taken accurately or near the same numbers. As shown in the graphs, some participants were able to meet their goals and some participants were not able to meet their goals. To conclude, we believe increasing steps does have an impact on the physical body. And if anybody were going to replicate the initial study, they should replicate the initial study and consider the impact of increasing steps daily and what it does to the individual body and the need for getting as accurate data as they can to make sure that they understand what the steps mean and what the steps is doing for them. Thank you.
Limitations. So there are 3 major limitations to our study. The first is time constraints. The second is sample size. and the third is accessibility. The biggest limitation that we faced during our study was time constraint. Time was something that we really struggled with. It was honestly the main thing that affected our data. And the reasoning behind our time constraint was that we had a long baseline phase. Because our data was not stabilizing, we decided we needed to have a longer baseline phase before implementing treatment. So we had a baseline phase that was much longer than the treatment phases. And because of this, our treatment phases had to be a lot shorter because of our time constraint. So we did have shorter treatment phases for 2, 3, and 4. Phase 1 was about the length that we wanted our treatment phase to be. And phases 2, 3, and 4 were only about 5 days each. So it was a lot shorter than we had planned for due to the time constraint. If we were given the opportunity to do the study again, we would definitely do a shorter baseline phase and do an equal number of sessions that make up each treatment phase, meaning that our baseline phase would probably be 5 to 7 days, and then each treatment phase would be the same number of days. It would probably be 5 to 7 as well. And it's just something that we learned from this study, that we need to manage our time better and focus on due dates in our study. The next limitation we will be discussing is our sample size. Our sample size was quite small. There was only 6 people in our study, and sample sizes that are too small can often affect the internal and external validity of studies. That means that small sample sizes can affect the degree of confidence that the study actually answers the research question without bias, and external validity it examines whether the study findings can be generalized to other contexts or situations. So small sample size can affect both of those. Small samples also reduce the power of the study, increase the margin of error, and often lead to a type 2 error, which means you do not reject a null hypothesis when it is actually false. Small sample sizes are also less representative of the entire population, and due to our small sample size, it was difficult to determine if our results provided a true finding. These results may be attributed to chance or coincidence rather than a true finding between the relationship between our steps and our goals. The last limitation we will be discussing of our study is accessibility. Accessibility was a very challenging component to this study because it measures walking, and obviously walking is not a very accessible behavior because there are people that cannot walk or have trouble walking. And also accessibility to the measurement devices used to measure our steps was a limitation because we used both a watch, an electronic smartwatch, and an iPhone. To measure our steps, we needed 2 different devices to be able to calculate our IOA data. So Apple Watches and iPhones are both expensive products, which again decreases the accessibility of our study. Their study may not be easy to replicate due to the expensive price of these electronic devices, and not everybody already owns one, so it would be very expensive to purchase. And also just the behavior of walking in general can be a very inaccessible behavior. So those are the 2 major accessibility limitations that we faced in our study.